Good morning, fellow Plexers, and happy Valentine's Day. Are we still all in love with Plex? I know I am. So, as some of you know, and as others will find out, I have quite the list of videos on YouTube, all concerning Plex in some way or another. So I decided to create a playlist with Casa OS. This is for people who want to use something besides Windows. They want to get into Linux and they want something easy on a small or mini PC that they can run headless to access from their normal Windows desktop or their normal Mac desktop or Linux desktop. And I want something that's economical for a new Plex user to set up, that will last a while, that will also have hardware accelerated transcoding for video. So something that I'm talking about would make a great little Plex music server or a great Plex DVR server, or someone who's going to be ripping their own media and not likely to need 30 or 40 or 60 terabytes of RAID storage. Now there's no RAID under this setup that we're going to use, but it's really for someone who just wants to install Plex and run it off from one hard drive and not worry about a more complicated setup. So this is perfect for a used 9th gen HP Pro desk system. You can fit a couple more drives in a bigger case like this than one of their little micro ones. So I have a 9th gen ProDesk 600 as my bench system, which I'll be switching to after this video to get Casa OS installed. This has one NVMe slot and it has 3 SATA ports, 2 free and 1 for the DVD drive, which you can just unplug because we don't need a DVD drive in a system like this. So when the cover is off, right in this area is room for one 3.5-inch rusty hard drive. Well, that could be your data drive. You could get a 4, 6, or 8 terabyte NAS drive from Western Digital, a WD Red drive, or from Seagate as an Iron Wolf or Iron Wolf Pro drives. I'm going to be a stickler on that end. Don't get a cheap hard drive. Get a NAS drive, something built to be running 24/7 if this is going to be a headless unit that's always on. Or if you wanted, you could use 3.5-inch drives. Western Digital Red makes 2.5-inch drives. And while there's no screws to secure them, you could stack up to 3 2.5-inch drives in the area that one 3.5-inch drive fits. Or another option is a Dell Optiplex. And again, you're looking for like an 8th gen or newer. This size, this micro Dell Optiplex, can take one NVMe drive and one 2.5-inch drive that could be an SSD or could be a plain rusty hard drive. Now, of course, this will hold more. I'm not sure how much more because I've only played with the micro ones. And this could also work for a Intel Mini PC or a NUC. So something like this holds one NVMe drive and one SATA drive, 2.5-inch, and I got kind of confused because this looks like an incredible deal. Okay, so I bought the i5 version of this for more money than this. This is a 14th Gen Core 3 100U, so this probably wouldn't be a bad Plex server for this, but it's it kind of distracted me. So what we'll be doing is we're going to use a flavor of Ubuntu called Lubuntu because it runs really good even on low-end systems. So even if you don't have at least an 8th or 9th gen Intel processor, Maybe you're going to do just a music server for Plex and you've just got a 2nd gen or 3rd or 4th gen computer laying around. This will be better than a bigger install. And then we'll just show how to install Casa OS. So this will be a series of videos, and we'll set it up so that the little small computer running Lubuntu and Casa OS can be headless, and you can access it from your Windows or Linux or Mac PC to manage. Alright, so it all starts with getting the operating system installed, and I forgot to prep for one thing. To create a bootable flash drive, use the Ventoy system. So you format a flash drive with Ventoy, which is its own little USB OS. So then once the flash drive is made, let me go to my files. I don't have one plugged in, but it'll show up here as just Ventoy. You can just copy any Linux ISO to the flash drive. You can copy more than one if you want to try out different distros. And then you hit the function key that lets you boot off the USB drive when you start your system. And then Ventoy loads and it presents you with these different ISOs, and you select one, and now you're live booting into it to test it out or to install. So instead of using a utility that makes a single flash drive only a bootable Linux distro, use Ventoy, because you can move files on and off from it. You can copy a Windows ISO to it. You can copy a Fedora ISO or a Pop OS or a regular Ubuntu. Any Linux distro you want to try, this is a permanent. You can change it, but it's just a nice little permanent thing to have handy. And you can even put a version of memtest on there if you can't get to that easily. Like Ubuntu, you can boot into memtest to test systems, to test your memory. I don't know what you can do with Windows, but if you've got memtest or even Ubuntu on a Ventoy flash drive, you can do some diagnostics in that area. Alright, I'm getting off the beaten track here. So I've got boxes installed, which allows me to set up a virtual session of any operating system so I can show you how to install Lubuntu. Alright, so this opened off. Alright, hold on just a second, please. I think I know what's going on here. There's a dialog screen that opened up on my second monitor that I can't move. Let me pause this and be right back. Or actually, I'll show you the behind the scenes fix that I think is what's going on. I use this GNOME Extensions Manager so that all my window placements are remembered, and sometimes the Smart Auto Move isn't perfect. So let's try this again. Install from File. Well, I can't get the dialog screen to not appear on my second monitor. So I'm just going to forge ahead, and I'm going to click on Home. Well, actually my username, and then the ISO folder, and then the Lubuntu file. So at least I can move this over. So let me just name this so I know why I've created it. And I am going to change the memory to 8 gigabytes. I have 32 in this machine, and I'll change this to 30. And I'll hit create. So now this represents the monitor. So I'll make it full screen, and the arrow keys lets me move around. I will try or install Ubuntu. And we're booting up into it. It's a live version. I'm going to click install. American English is good. It can find my location, so it's picking the New York time zone. English US keyboard default. I'm going to stay with a normal installation and check this download and install updates following installation. I'll click next. Now when you're doing this, hopefully you have a brand new SSD in whatever machine you're using, or it's got a previous OS on it. If it has a previous OS or any files on it, you're going to destroy it. So you'll click the erase disk. Next. I'm going to just use my first name, which gives me the username of Albert. And let me change this to something I'll recognize on the network. So I'm recreating these steps on my bench system in my basement to then switch to that once it's installed. I'll give a simple password, something I wouldn't use in real life, and I'll log in automatically without asking for the password, because we want everything to start up once it's headless if it has to reboot. So I'll click install, install now, and you saw it was creating the partitions it needed, and now it's just going about its install routine. So watch the time. It's 11 o'clock even my time in New York State, and I'll come back once it finishes. Alright, I'm popping back in. We're at 90%. It's been there a little bit, and I'm only 2 minutes in. So this is really a quick install, but I have to admit, we're running this virtually on a 12th gen i9 processor. This system has 32 gigs of memory. It might not be quite as fast on my 9th gen i5 that's in my own HP ProDesk system. And I will set that up. It's got a 1 terabyte, I think it's a 1 terabyte Samsung Evo NVMe in it. And I will set storage up on either a 3.5 or a 2.5 inch Seagate Rusty hard drive. I have one of each I can use. Alright, so let me pause this video until it finishes. Alright, that's quick. So virtually it took just over 3 minutes. So now we're going to click done and leave the restart now checked. So it's powering back up, and remember, this is still a virtual session of an operating system. And the Ventoy flash drive would be exactly how you'd install any Linux distro. I normally use Pop OS. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm delayed here. I have to hit enter. Click back into Lubuntu. So that's how you would install any Linux OS with a Ventoy flash drive. I normally use Pop OS, but that's a bit cluttered for this series of videos, so I'll just use Ubuntu. I triple boot off from 3 different 2 terabyte NVMe drives. My main OS is Pop OS, and my alternate is Ubuntu 24.04, and I also have the latest version of Fedora installed. And sometimes OBS screws with boxes running, and I lose the video in this session. So that appears to be what happened here. I'm going to, I guess I'll stop OBS, get this booted up, and then I'll just join the 2 videos together. So I'll go here to the 3 dots, and I will force shutdown. Alright, so I'll stop the video and I'll get this running, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. I've got Lubuntu running, and this is basically what you get. You get what you see. So now I have to get this installed on my bench system and also get OBS Studio installed so you can see and hear what I'm going to do next. And basically, we're just going to follow some simple commands. I'll open up a terminal and I'll copy and paste in this command to hit enter, and then I'll copy and paste this in, and I've got a couple other commands to copy and paste in, and then we'll be able to access Casa OS installed on my ProDesk, and I can do it from any computer. So I'll come back to this PC running Ubuntu to configure Casa OS. And I will be back. Okay, so the second video, I'm back on my Ubuntu desktop. I've got Lubuntu installed on my ProDesk, my HP ProDesk system, but unfortunately it's such a minimal install I can't get OBS Studio to work. And I don't really need to, because it's only a short bit of things I have to actually do in the actual machine. So once you've got Lubuntu installed, click this menu down here and just search for terminal. And you want to choose Q terminal, just like that. So then you're just going to have this page open, the wiki.casa.io English Get Started page open. And I'm just going to copy this command, and you can't use the keyboard to paste it. You can't use Control V. You have to right click and choose Paste Clipboard. Hit enter, type your password, your user password for Lubuntu. And this will take a bit, but let's watch it because I can recognize some things. NetTools was installed, SMB was installed, CIFS Utils was installed, Merge GERFS was installed. That makes multiple JBOD hard drives into one hard drive, like one volume. It's nothing we're going to use. I don't think it's safe. I think you should just keep a JBOD hard drive as it is, but you could merge them into one as long as you're backing your data up. But we're not going to get involved. We're just going to use Casa OS on Lubuntu to have one rusty storage drive with Plex running in a Docker container off an SSD under Casa OS. Just a simple little server you can access from any place. Alright, so this is important. This is how you reach Casa OS. But we're not going to use that URL, we'll use the actual URL. So I'm all done. I could do either one of these. I don't have to do both. So we'll exit the terminal, and now this can just be by itself. I am going to shut it down, but you have to leave it running, and you can move to any other PC you want to. You don't have to work on this one. So I'm going to choose leave and shut down, but again, you're leaving it running and you can move to your desktop computer. Alright, it's powered off. I can be done with that. So let me bring up my Google Photos. This is a picture of my bench system. So there's a button over here. You can see how the in part of it, when you press that, that releases. You have to take this front cover off first. Just lift those 4 tabs and remove that. Then you can press this button and this whole tray tips upward. If this is like a door opening, and there's 3 different catches here. You can remove it, and underneath it is the NVMe slot. It's kind of along the front of the motherboard up here. So that can be your OS drive, your boot drive. And then you can see how I've got a rusty hard drive sitting here. It's not attached. It has some standoffs from the factory that slip into these slots, and there's 2 on the front to secure it. But if you remove that, you can actually stack 3 small 2.5-inch drives in this area. Now you wouldn't want to ship it like this because they'd move around, but just on your own shelf someplace as your server, it won't hurt anything to have them in there and put the cover back on. Now, there is 3 SATA ports on the board, but I had to get an adapter for the power supply to move from the one single power supply it has to 2. So if you're going to use 3 small drives, you'd want an adapter that's split off in 3. There is another proprietary power connector that plugs into the DVD drive in the back, but I didn't look into trying to modify that because you just can't hold many drives in here. So let's go to another picture. Where am I? This is the URL I want. So let me get my text document open. I got a scratch pad going here. So I want http://192.168.68.61, and that will let me access the actual Casa OS running under Lubuntu on my system in the basement. Alright, so we'll go to a new web page. Let's make this full screen, and I'll paste that in up here, and I get the welcome screen. So this is technically a headless system now. If I turn the monitor off that's attached to it in the basement, and I'll have to test it later, but I'm sure it'll work, because I set Lubuntu to log in automatically without my password. When the machine is started, whether a monitor is attached to it or not, it's just going to start up and Casa OS is going to be running. So, got to create an account. So let me just use this. So I did another test video and didn't like where it was going, so I redid it. Alright, let me do it this way. Let me pick that, but let me manually type in the password I want to use and create. Well, let's see what I did wrong. Okay, so it's a simple password. We'll update that. And I don't need to see the news from Casa OS. You can do it if you want. Well, let's just do it. So again, I've only played with this one time quickly, and I was going to try to get RAID storage set up, but that's too complicated for a simple use, and I really think Unraid's the better option for RAID storage if you're not going to buy a consumer NAS. So this is just a simple server. So what we need to do is we need to get this drive set up. This is our storage drive. It is a SSD. I thought things might be faster, but it's 1 gig in size. And even though this says storage, this is our Lubuntu drive. I don't really like that it's named storage, but it is what it is. So let's see. Alright, NVMe, the other SSD. Let's see if I can do it right from, let's do it from here. Create storage. I'll choose this drive. Now let me call this Media. Media 1. In case you add another drive. And let's format and create. So I don't know how long this process will take, but it looks like it's done. So now what I'm interested in is how do I access it on the network before I go to Plex. Let's see what options there are. Well, so let's consider this Media 1 a volume Okay, so let's see what options there are here. It's got this. Not many. Okay, so let's go to Files and see what options there are. This root data should be my boot drive. I've got this Media 1. Let me click into that. Okay, so there's nothing here besides this Lost and Found folder. So let's see what the Upload or Create button does. New folder. Let's call this Plex Media. And let's make it shared and submit. I'm going to create some structure. New folder structure. I'm going to assume you might have more than one movie or TV show library, so I'm going to create some library sort folder structure. I'm just going to keep clicking shared. Alright, so inside the Plex Media shared folder, we have this sort folder. I'm going to go in it and create 2 more folders. No, I won't. I'm fine here. Let me back up. Let me create this folder. TV dash, and I'll create another folder. We're just going to call this music. You don't really need a sort folder for a music collection. Everything would be in one library folder. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is interesting. Let me just see what I can do here before we create the Plex container. Alright, so just the file browser in Ubuntu. Things are going to be different under Windows, but let's see, where do we see this? Under the share option, it tells you how to access it through Windows. Alright, so let's stick with Linux with the Ubuntu. Other locations. Alright, I see my Albert-Lubuntu-Casa OS, which is what I named the system in the basement, and I see my shared media folder on my 2 Synology NASes. So I'm going to copy some of this media in once I have access to this. Okay, so I'm not seeing any password issues. So I have this Plex Media. Oh, I do have the password. Okay, so let's register this with the username I created for Casa OS and the password, and I'll click Remember Forever. Okay, so now I can see this structure. So let's get 2 windows going. Let's minimize that. So, do I have local structure right on this system? I may, because I have a test server running here too. So let's go to Home, Media. Okay, so I have some things here. So let's do this. Let's go into this movie library I created, and I'm going to copy and paste this in. Let's see how fast it's copying. This will tell us in a little bit. 83.1 0.2 megabits per second. That's pretty good. That's a nice clip. So if you're ever wondering how a copy operation like this compares to what you normally think of as a speed test for how fast something is, you know how fast you can download something. Just go to a calculator and take that number and multiply it by 8. That would be the equivalent of a file coming in that fast on a speed test. So is it the theoretical limit of a 1 gig connection? No, it's not. But this is also copying off an older 9th gen processor in my basement, or from my desktop PC to an older 9th gen HP in the basement. And this is certainly fast enough for me. Alright, so that's almost done. Let's copy over this bigger movie library. So basically I'm moving files to a headless file server right now. Let's back up and I'll go into this sort folder for TV show libraries and I'll copy over these two folders. These are not real media. They're test media, little tiny video clips that I can show on YouTube. Plexers, test 1, 2. I use these dummy files as examples of how to name media. So this will copy fast. And then I think oh, actually I did that wrong. Well, we'll fix it. Oh no, I didn't do it wrong. I did it right. Let's rename this. Let's copy it first. And let's see how we're doing. Did everything copy? Oh, I did, because this is all dummy files also. This is not real media. So that's what I had set up on this. I'm not copying real media, so it all copied over fast. I have so many test servers that I've used for different videos, sometimes I don't remember what I've done. So this is fully accessible from Ubuntu. I just used the password I used to set Casa OS up. So that's pretty easy. So let's go back to Casa OS. Okay, so what I want to do, let's see how you get back to home. Let me hit this X here. Okay, here's a trick. I'm going to make this into a Chrome app, seeing I'm using Google Chrome. Make it more like an appliance. So I'm going to go to Cast, Save, and Share and click Install Page as an app. And I'm going to name it Casa OS Pro Desk Test, just to help me remember. I'm going to install that. And now I can close my regular browser window or minimize it. Now I've got just this here. And it doesn't have a good icon yet. It's a duplicate Chrome. So let me get rid of this now. I'll close it. Go back and start typing Casa. Now you see it as its own icon here. And now it's started up with its own icon that I can right click and pin to the dash. And I can move that wherever I want. Let me bring it into this area. So now it's just a little icon that opens up its own window of Google Chrome, because you don't really need the control of back and forth while you're in an operating system like this. And I'm going to highlight the desktop icon that was created and get rid of it. So this is how I use Linux. Chrome app, Chrome app, Chrome app, Chrome app for Google Calendar, a real program, Chrome app, a real program, settings, terminal, a real program, Chrome app, real program, Chrome app, and so on. So I kind of use Linux as sort of like a Chromebook cross with a regular Linux operating system. Okay, so that's full screen. We've got some data set up. And let's see. Let me make this just a touch smaller. So seeing we've got things on that, I'm going to get rid of that new drive. I guess I can't click X. Well, I'll leave it alone. So now I'm going to go to the App Store and I'm going to search here for Plex. I don't know what this is, Big Bear Casa OS. Let me click into it. Developer Plex Inc. Click into this, and this looks a little bit more professional with the developer being Plex themselves. So let me do a custom install. Also, it's using the Linux server image, which I like. The title is called Plex. That's where it's getting the URL or the icon from, that URL. The web interface is going to be this. Let me just bring this over because this is just how we're going to access it if it doesn't want to start by itself, just like we start any other instance of Plex. It's always got to be the web address, or I'm sorry, the local IP address with the port with /web. Okay, so here's the volume mapping. So this is all on the SSD, the NVMe, the boot drive, but we don't want our media from that. We want it from the other drive. So let me click up. This is Linux after all, so what am I looking for? MNT. There's that Media 1 volume I created on the other drive, and I'm going to map it to Plex Media, to that shared folder in it. And I can stop here because I can see everything inside. And let me just change this. I don't like uppercase. Let me change this to my Plex Media. And I think everything else we can just leave alone. It looks like it's adding what it needs to add for hardware acceleration. We'll find that out. Alright, so that's the only thing I've done. I've pointed the storage to the storage volume I've created on the second SSD, which could be a rusty hard drive. I'll click install. So this is my first time. I played around with Casa OS once to see about rated storage, gave up because Unraid is such a better solution, and now we're back in it with a simple install, and this is the first time configuring a Plex container. Luckily, I seem to know what I was doing by my past container experience under a Synology NAS or an Unraid install. So let's click it. It says open. What are the other options? Open, tips, settings, check then update. Let's do the settings. That's what we saw for the configuration. So let's open it. Okay, it opened great. I don't have to manually try to open it, so let's go in and name it, and we'll get it claimed. I'll have to connect it to my Plex account, I would imagine. Okay, so we will call this, we're going to call it exactly what it is. Lubuntu Ubuntu-Casa OS. Well, let me get rid of the dash. I'll say yes because I do have a port forwarded for that machine already. I think it's 32500 from memory. If it doesn't work, I'll check my router app on my phone. And we'll add some libraries once we get past this point. Okay, so let's add a movie library. Let's add a couple. We'll just call it movie. Browse for media. And see how I changed the name in the container to what to look for, my Plex media. It just makes so much sense to make it something you'll easily recognize. Okay, so I see my sort folder for movie libraries. I'm going to add the main movie library. Click add. And I always suggest at this point you make a decision if you want to add the automatically created movie collections that are listed at the movie database. So under the advanced option, you would change this to your preference. One would create a collection even if you only have one movie out of as many that are in the collection. I like to not see the collection until I have at least 2 movies. If you really only want to see trilogies and larger collections, you can set it to 3 or 4. Two's my number. And that's the only thing I change, but this is an option too. If you don't want to see the collections from the library view, you can adjust this to hide collections but show their items, or you can hide items that are in collections. So if you have the Back to the Future movies, this will show the Back to the Future collection in the library tab, but it won't show the individual movies. Now that's great if all 2 or 3 movies start the same way, Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. But something like the Fast and Furious series, where one movie might be Too Fast and Furious and the other might be Furious 14 or something like that, then you only see it based on the collection, and one of your friends and family might be looking for Too Fast and Furious and never realize that that's now hidden in the collection named Fast and Furious. So you kind of got to think what you want to do. So I'm going to choose both, show collections and their items. We're not going to see an example in this video, but that's where I'm going to set it for now. Okay, so let's add the other movie library. Next will get me to browse, and I'll browse again to my Plex Media. I'll go into the sort library folder for movies, and I'll pick the actual library structure for my documentary movie. There's only one here. And I'll do the same thing, the same collection, to and show collections and their items, which is pre-selected. So now I'll add, let's go back, let's add a TV show library or 2, browse for media. Here's the alias that leads to the real shared media folder. I'll pick the sort folder for TV show libraries. I'll add this main one. And because I only name from TVDB, which is the best option if you rip your own media or you might want to transition to a Sonar install later on, which only pulls naming from TVDB2, I would suggest changing episode ordering to the TVDB, and that's all you have to do. So then let's add that last TV show library, and then we'll do the music one. So maybe this could be called Kids too. I'm just going to call it Disney. So the alias, the sort folder, and the actual library structure. Add library, and now we'll do the music library last. So a music library is going to depend on good embedded metadata. It depends more on the embedded metadata than it does on the way you structure the media, unlike a TV or movie library. So we'll browse the same alias, and now this is just an actual library folder and not a sort folder, but there's no music in it. And we'll fix that after we get the server up. I'll show you how this all works. So let's add that. Now we can do next, and now we're done. So this comes up with my default Plex interface. If I go to settings, you see I've got the server we've just created. There's no remote access, but you see my other servers too. So let's give it remote access. And again, just off the top of my head, I think this is 32,500. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to look that up on my phone. And oh, I was correct. So I used to not try to show my public IP address, but it's too difficult to block it out. And this is a good explanation. You can run multiple servers, because to access a Plex server, it's a combination of the local IP address and the port number. So all local Plex servers, this 32400 can't be changed. Well, because you only have one external IP address, port forwarding lets you forward this port only for this local IP address to a new external port. So watch how this changes. If I change servers, same IP address, I'm sorry, different IP address, that ends in 116 and this ends in 61. So this is the address of my HP ProDesk, and this is the address of my older Synology NAS, and both servers have 32400 because together you can access the server. Well, on this one, I've used this. Let's see, what have I done? Let me go back to... Alright, so I have remote access on this at this forwarded port. This is a test server I haven't forwarded the port on apparently. Let me go to this test server, and you can see how any server outside the network is going to have the same external IP address, just with a different port. And I have a video on all of this that would be better than just trying to figure it out from what I'm saying here. Alright, so now let me go to the transcoder section. I'll leave that at automatic, and I will look for my iGPU here. You don't have to change to this, but I like seeing it, so I'll save changes. So it's already using hardware acceleration when available. It's already using hardware accelerated video encoding. I'm going to add the new experimental HEVC encoding, save changes, and that pops up this second HEVC optimization. So this server now has hardware acceleration going for it. And then let's see how some automatic library scanning works on it. Oh, wrong section. I want to be settings library. I'm going to choose to scan my library automatically, run a partial scan when changes are detected, and I'm going to click this dangerous option for Linux users. Lubuntu is Linux, Casa OS is a Linux program, server program running on top of my Linux desktop, and Plex gives this warning. Linux systems limit the maximum number of watch directories. This may cause problems with large music libraries. Well, I don't know how Plex monitors file system changes under a Mac or under Windows, but under Linux it uses a subsystem called IO Notify, and that can only watch 8,192 folders. So most Plex TV show or movie libraries don't approach that total number of folders, but a music library certainly can. With you know, if you have 100 artists and there's 20 albums each, that's a lot of folders. So you combine all that with a movie and TV show library, you can get darn close to that 8,100 limit, almost 8,200 limit of folders. And Plex will act haywire. Now you can cross that limit, and Chuck PA from Plex's forum, he's the Linux guru there, the Plex employee that knows everything about Linux. He has a complicated formula where you can raise the IO notify limit, but there's a warning. You shouldn't just arbitrarily raise it. You should use his formula to figure out how much you need to raise it with a cushion, which means eventually you have to raise it again. With that issue, you just uncheck all this and do a time scan, which doesn't work bad. But we'll leave the automatic stuff on. I just want to give you that warning. As your server grows, you may have to turn all that off if it gets too big, and just pick. And I use every 2 hours on my server because it's disconnected. I can't use automatic scanning, plus my library is too large. My Plex server runs under Ubuntu on a little NUC that points back to my Synology NAS where the media is. So I just scan it every 2 hours, and if I need to manually scan, that's what I do. Okay, so I over-explain things sometimes. So you gotta drop down and save the changes. Okay, so let's go back to see what's going on here. The Casa OS server needs an update. Let's go view it first. We're still on that in the web app. If I go to libraries, I see the libraries I've created, and let me jump into the music or the movie one. So everything's scanned in properly, everything looks good, and if I back up, the only thing that's empty is the music one. So let's take a look at that first. Actually, let's update Plex first, and then we'll add some music. Alright, so I can't see my cursor. Let's do it this way. Let's get these side by side. And as I mentioned frequently, I'm not a pro YouTuber. I don't script a lot out. This is all basically cold, and I admitted that I did a test run on Casa OS with a different intent in mind and decided it wasn't the video to try to do because it wasn't simple, and I just stopped it. So let's go to all apps. Maybe not. Let's just go to Plex. Let's click this and check for an update. Well, it's saying it's up to date. Let's do check then update. It's saying it's up to date, and that may be a limitation of using this OS. It may take it a while before it recognizes an update, even though Plex is telling us there's an update. I'm going to keep this setup intact, and I'll see if within a week this updates. And maybe I'll figure out how to manually update. Well, let me stop the server and see if that changes things. Again, I'm doing this cold. So we're going to lose this. If I refresh, the web app is gone because that server's not there. And this is a direct IP address log into the web app. If I went to app.plex.tv, I'd see everything, and I just would be missing that one server. Alright, so now if I go into settings, it's hard to see, but the Ubuntu Casa OS test is trying to connect. It's just not there anymore. There it is. There's an error. So we've stopped it in the Casa OS interface. Let's check then update now. Okay, it still says it's up to date.
Motion detected.
Okay, so let's start the server. So now it's back, and now let's add media to it. So we can get rid of this interface. We don't need two Plex interfaces up. We'll just refresh this one. And this is a step I missed. So let's go to settings, make sure we're under this. Let's go to general, and where am I? Maybe it's not general. Oh, general here under Plex Web. Click sign in automatically, save changes, and now you won't have to be bothered with that. The next time you come back, you'll just see it. Okay, so let's get to our music library, which is empty. And let's bring up this. Let me go to my older Synology NAS, because I did a video last night where I prepped some things. Okay, so I'm going to copy in 3 artists. Let me show you. These have all been run through MusicBrainz Picard, so this may take a while. Let me do it one at a time. Do a new window. Let's get everything sized just right. Okay, so let's find our Casa OS shared folder. Let's go. All right, we got the music. So let's copy this. Let's copy this and this. Okay, so 29 seconds left for this, 26 for that, and 40 for that. Let's see if our automatic scanning settings pick this up. It may not, because there's no media in there. I probably should have put one in first, but I can add some of this other public domain media if I need to.
You have a new flash mail.
Alright, pretty close to being done. Okay, so we've got media in there. And we don't have any activity. So let's manually scan this. So now it's scanning all the albums. Let's change to the library mode, or the library tab. Alright, so it found our artist. It's got the albums. And this one is an album in one of the other folders. It's more of a compilation. It's its own album. Red Horse, and it has its own artwork it doesn't really look real, but it is, trust me. So now we are going to bring something else in to see if it scans automatically. Let's bring this public domain stuff that I had set up. Let's copy that to the Casa OS. Alright, so now it's sensing it after the library already had something in it to start with. So the automatic scanning is working. You just got to move the media over. And I have, all my test servers are usually public domain media, so I could start media and not get in trouble with YouTube with a copyright strike. Alright, so let's do this. Let's see if I can see it under the Plex HTPC client app for Linux. Okay, so let's go to more, and there's the new server with the libraries. So now, in case you don't know, let me go up, down to settings, and where do I want to be? Experience or account? There's an option here to reset this. I don't know where the option is to reset this. Maybe it's up here. Alright, there it is. Reset home customization. Now I can choose which server I want to be primary. The space or the enter key. Oh, I guess you just have to choose one or the other. So the new server is the primary. If I hit continue, I can do the same thing with what I want to appear. So if I didn't want to see the watch list, I could unselect it with the enter key and so on. Continue. So now this client app is only seeing the one server primary. I can manually go to the other servers. But primarily this is the server we just set up under Lubuntu with Casa OS, and it's totally remote and can be managed with another PC, and this little computer can run headless and be accessed all you want. So I've never used Casa OS besides a quick half install, and it wasn't too hard to figure out. And now that this is in a Docker container, this can be moved any place. I'd have to go downstairs to the computer and find the structure to copy it, but this container could be moved to a Synology or a QNAP or an Unraid server. Those two consumer ones, or a self-install like Unraid. So I really like Unraid for the redundant storage. I like my consumer Synology NAS for the redundant storage. But if you want a simple server, you want to get out of Windows, and you want to use something like this to have it headless, Casa OS is really not a bad thing. You can manage it once it's simple to install. Just install any flavor of Ubuntu, or even Debian if you want. And I don't know how this will work, because this is an older iGPU. This is a 9th gen i5. We gain hardware acceleration on it. So any Ubuntu flavor is going to have a newer Linux kernel that will see the iGPU in like a brand new Meteor Lake family 14th gen mini computer or desktop computer. Debian might not see that because it would have an older Linux kernel. Unraid right now won't see that iGPU because the Linux kernel is older, and that's the area I've got kind of stuck in with my Unraid install, which I pulled a 11th gen i5 NUC out from underneath it and slid back in an i5 14th gen ASUS NUC. Unraid can't see the iGPU because the driver can't load automatically because the kernel's not new enough, and supposedly the next beta version of Unraid will allow me to add hardware acceleration back. So some people might say, just do this under Debian. Well, it would depend on your CPU and iGPU. If it's brand new, Debian's kernel might not support it. So there's them potatoes to think about. And that's why I used a light flavor of Ubuntu. If your headless unit is like an 11th gen or 12th gen Intel CPU, maybe use Ubuntu as the base because you're not looking for the leanest version of Linux to then install Casa OS on. I actually don't really care for Lubuntu. It's a minimalistic version of Ubuntu that doesn't take many resources that might work good on, say, a 4th gen processor, 4th gen Intel processor, if you're only setting up maybe a music server for Plex. Anyway, this has gotten long enough. Thanks for watching. I think at 50 minutes, I think I'm just going to add the other video to this one and make one long video instead of having a playlist. And today is still Happy Valentine's Day, so love your Plex server. If you don't have a Plex server yet, build one, make one, and love it. Thanks for watching. Happy Plexing. Hello fellow Plexers, I'm back. I'll tack this on to the end of the last video. When I finished recording, I quickly discovered how to update this Casa OS Plex server, and it's a step I missed in the container creation. So, you see there's an update available, and if I switch to a newer server, you see it's 1.41.4.9463, where the Casa OS is 1.41.3.9314. So it's really easy. Go back to the Casa OS interface, click the 3 dots around the Plex container, and stop the container. You see the lines jumping? They stopped, so the container has stopped. If I refresh my web app, can't see the server anymore. So in Casa OS, hit the 3 dots, hit settings, and this is what you change to latest from the stable 1.41.3. So now if I save this, it's going to reconfigure the container and start it back up. So Plex is okay, it's already running. Do I have to refresh this? No, I didn't. It came up and you see it's the current version and you no longer have the notice to update. Really quick and easy. I didn't have to Google for the results. I was just playing around with the container settings and it is good to go. So now this ends the Casa OS video, and happy Plexing. And again, happy Valentine's Day. Love your Plex server, friends and family.